and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we continue our reading of The Star Beast by Robert Heinlein. Last time, the beast in question, Lummox, made his appearance in court. He did this by walking straight through the wall of the courthouse. Chapter 5. A Matter of Viewpoint. The Right Honorable Mr. Kiku, Undersecretary for Spatial Affairs, opened a desk drawer and looked over his collection of pills. There was no longer any doubt. His stomach ulcer was acting up again. He selected one and turned wearily back to his tasks. He read an order from the Departmental Bureau of Engineering grounding all Pelican-class interplanetary ships until certain modifications were accomplished. Mr. Kiku did not bother to study the attached engineering report, but signed approval, checked effective immediately, and dropped the papers in the outgoing basket. Engineering safety in space was the responsibility of Bu Eng. Kiku himself knew nothing of engineering and did not wish to. He would back up the decisions of his chief engineer, or fire him and get another. But he realized glumly that the financial lords who owned the Pelican-class ships would soon be knocking on the ear of the secretary, and shortly thereafter the secretary, out of his depth and embarrassed by the political power wielded by those fine gentlemen, would dump them in his lap. He was beginning to have doubts about this new secretary. He was not shaping up. The next item was for his information only, and had been routed to him because of standing orders that anything concerning the secretary must reach his desk, no matter how routine. This item appeared routine and unimportant. According to the synopsis, an organization calling itself the Friends of Lummox, and headed by a Mrs. Beulah Murgatroyd, was demanding an audience with the Secretary of Spatial Affairs. They were being shunted to the Special Assistant Secretary, Public Relations. Mr. Kiku read no further. Wes Robbins would kiss them to death, and neither he nor the secretary would be disturbed. He amused himself with the idea of punishing the secretary by inflicting Mrs. Murgatroyd on him, but it was merely a passing fancy. The secretary's time must be reserved for really important cornerstone layings, not wasted on crackpot societies. Any organization calling itself the Friends of this or that always consisted of someone with an axe to grind, plus the usual assortment of prominent custard heads and professional stuffed shirts. But such groups could be a nuisance. Therefore, never grant them the Danegeld they demanded. He sent it to files and picked up a memorandum from Bu Econ. A virus had gotten into the great yeast plant at St. Louis. The projection showed a possibility of protein shortage and more drastic rationing. Even starvation on Earth was no direct interest to Mr. Kiku, but he stared thoughtfully while the slide rule in his head worked a few figures. Then he called his assistant. "Wong, have you been to Bu Econ AY 0428? I believe so, boss. That's the St. Louis yeast thing? Yes. What have you done about it? Nothing. Not my pigeon, I believe. You believe, eh? Our outstations are your business, aren't they? Look over your shipping schedules for the next 18 months, correlate with AY 0428, and project. You may have to buy Australian sheep and actually get them into our possession. We can't have our people going hungry because some moron in St. Louis dropped his socks in a yeast vat." "Yes, sir." Mr. Kiku turned back to work. He realized unhappily he had been too brusque with Wong. His present frame of mind, he knew, was not Wong's fault, but that of Dr. Ftamel. No, not Ftamel's fault, his own. He knew that he should not harbor race prejudice, not in this job. He was aware intellectually that he himself was relatively safe from persecution that could arise from differences of skin and hair and face contour, for the one reason that weird creatures such as Dr. Ftamel had made the differences between breeds of men seem less important. Still, there it was. He hated Ftamel's very shadow. He could not help it. If the so-and-so would wear a turban, it would help, instead of walking around with those dirty snakes on his head wiggling like a can of worms. But oh no, the Rargelians were proud of them. There was a suggestion in their manner that anyone without them was not quite human. Come now. Ftamel was a decent chap. He made a note to invite Ftamel to dinner, not put it off any longer. After all, he would make certain of deep hypnosis for preparation. The dinner need not be difficult, but his ulcer gave a fresh twinge at the thought. Kiku did not hold it against the Argelian that he had dropped an impossible problem in the department's tired lap. Impossible problems were routine. It was just, well, why didn't the monster get a haircut? The vision of the Chesterfieldian Dr. Ftamel with a shingle cut, his scalp all lumps and bumps, enabled Mr. Kiku to smile. He resumed his work feeling better. The next item was a brief of a field report. Oh, yes, Sergei Greenberg. Good boy, Sergei. He was reaching for his pen to approve the recommendation even before he'd finished reading it. Instead of signing, he stared for almost half a second, then punched a button. Files, send up the full report of Mr. Greenberg's field job, the one he got back from a few days ago. Do you have the reference number, sir? That intervention matter. You find it. Wait, it's RT0411, dated Saturday. I want it right now. He had only time to dispose of half a dozen items when seconds later the delivery tube went thwonk and a tiny cylinder popped out on his desk. He stuck it in his reading machine and relaxed, with his right thumb resting on a pressure plate to control the speed with which the PRID fled across the screen. In less than 7 minutes, he'd zipped through not only a full transcript of the trial, but also Greenberg's report of all else that had happened. Mr. Kiku could read at least 2,000 words a minute with the aid of a machine. Oral readings and personal interviews he regarded as time wasters. But when the machine clicked off, he decided that an oral report was necessary. He leaned to his interoffice communicator and flipped a switch. Greenberg. Greenberg looked up from his desk. Howdy, boss. Come here, please. He switched off without politenesses. Greenberg decided that his boss man's stomach must be bothering him again, but it was too late to find some urgent business outside the departmental building. He hurried upstairs and reported with his usual cheery grin. Howdy, Chief. Morning. I've been reading your intervention report. So? How old are you, Greenberg? 37. What is your present rank? Sir? Diplomatic officer second class, acting first. What the deuce? Uncle Henry knew these answers. He probably knew what shoe size he was. Old enough to have sense, Kiku mused. Rank enough to be assigned an ambassador or executive deputy to the politically appointed ambassador. Sergei, how come you are so confounded stupid? Greenberg's jaw muscles clamped, but he said nothing. Well? Sir, Greenberg answered icily, you are older and more experienced than I am. May I ask why you are so confounded rude? Mr. Kiku's mouth twitched, but he did not smile. A fair question. My psychiatrist tells me that it is because I'm an anarchist in the wrong job. Now sit down and we'll discuss why you are so thick-headed. Cigarettes in the chair arm. Greenberg sat down, discovered he did not have a light, and asked for one. I don't smoke, answered Kiku. I thought those were the self-striking kind, aren't they? Oh, so they are. Greenberg lit up. See, you don't use your eyes and ears. Sergei, once that beast talked, you should have postponed the hearing until we knew all about him. I suppose so. You suppose so? Son, your subconscious alarm should have been clanging like a bed alarm on Monday morning. As it is, you let the implications be sprung on you when you thought the trial was over. And by a girl, a mere child. I'm glad I don't read the papers. I'll bet they had fun. Greenberg blushed. He did read the papers. Then when she had you tangled up like a rangatoo, trying to find its own feet, instead of facing her challenge and meeting it how? By adjourning, of course, and ordering the investigation you should have ordered to start with. But I did order it. Don't interrupt me. I want you browned on both sides. Then you proceed to hand down the decision, the like of which has not been seen since Solomon ordered the baby sawed in half. What mail-order law school did you attend? Harvard, Greenberg answered sullenly. Well, I shouldn't be too harsh on you. You're handicapped. But by the 77 seven-sided gods of Senvachil, what did you do next? First, you deny a petition from the local government itself to destroy this brute in the public interest. Then you reverse yourself, grant the prayer, and tell them to kill it. subject only to routine approval from this department, all in 10 minutes. Exant omnes, laughing. Son, I don't mind you making a fool of yourself, but must you include the department? Boss, Greenberg said humbly, I made a mistake. When I saw the mistake, I did the only thing I could do. I reversed myself. The beast really is dangerous, and there are no proper facilities for confining it in Westville. If it had not been beyond my power, I would have ordered it destroyed at once without referring back to the department's approval. For your approval. Huh. You weren't sitting where I was, sir. You didn't see that solid wall bulge in. You didn't see the destruction. I'm not impressed. Did you ever see a city that had been flattened by a fusion bomb? What does one courthouse wall matter? Probably some thieving contractor didn't beef it up. Boss, you should have seen the cage he broke out of first. Steel I-beams, welded. He tore them like straw. I recall that you inspected him in that cage. Why didn't you see to it he was confined so he couldn't get out? Huh? It's no business of the department to provide jails. Son, a factor concerning in any way anything from out there is the very personal business of this department. You know that. Once you know it awake and asleep, clear down to your toes, you'll begin to trot through a perfunctory routine like an honorary chairman sampling soup in a charity hospital. You were supposed to be there with your nose twitching and your ears quivering on the lookout for special situations. You flubbed. Now tell me about this beast. I read the report, I saw his picture, but I don't feel him. Well, it's a non-balancing multipedal type, 8 legs and about 7 feet high at the dorsal ridge. Kiku sat up straight. 8 legs? Hands? Hands? No. Manipulative organs of any sort? A modified foot? None, Chief. If there had been, I would have ordered a full-scale investigation at once. The feet are about the size of nail kegs and as dainty. Why? Never mind, another matter. Go on. The impression is something like a rhinoceros, something like a triceratops, though the articulation is unlike anything native to this planet. Lummox, his young master calls him, and the name fits. It's a rather engaging beast, but stupid. That's the danger. It's so big and powerful that it is likely to hurt people through clumsiness and stupidity. It does talk, but about as well as a 4-year-old child. In fact, it sounds as if it had swallowed a baby girl. Why stupid? I note that its master with the history book name claims that it's bright. Greenberg smiled. He is prejudiced. I talked with it, boss. It's stupid. I can't see that you have established that. Assuming that an ET is stupid because he can't speak our language, well, is like assuming an Italian is illiterate because he speaks broken English, a non sequitur. But look, boss, no hands. Maximum intelligence lower than monkeys, maybe as high as a dog, though not likely. Well, I'll concede that you are orthodox in xenological theory. That is all. Someday that assumption is going to rise up and slap the classic xenist in the face. We'll find a civilization that doesn't need to pick at things with patty paws, evolved beyond it. Want to bet? No. Where is this Lummox now? Greenberg looked flustered. Boss, this report I'm about to make is now in the microfilm lab. It should be on your desk any minute. Okay, so you were on the ball this time. Let's have it. I got chummy with the local judge and asked him to keep me advised. Of course, they couldn't throw this critter into the local Bastille. In fact, they did not have anything strong enough to hold him, so they had learned the hard way. And nothing could be built in a hurry that would be strong enough. Believe me, that cage he crushed out of was strong. But the local police chief got a brainstorm, and they had an empty reservoir with sides about 30 feet high, reinforced concrete, part of the fire system. So they built a ramp and herded him down into it, then removed the ramp. It looked like a good dodge. The creature isn't built for jumping. Sounds okay. Yes, but that isn't all. Judge O'Farrell told me that the chief of police was so jittery, he decided not to wait for departmental okay. He went ahead with the execution. What? Let me finish. He did not tell anybody, but accidentally on purpose, the intake valve was opened that night, and the reservoir filled up. In the morning, there was Lummox at the bottom. So Chief Dressier assumed that his accident had been successful and that he had drowned the beast. So it did not bother Lummox at all. He had been underwater several hours, but when the water drained off, he woke up, stood up, and said good morning. Amphibious, probably. What steps have you taken to put a stop to this high-handedness? Just a second, sir. Dressier knew that firearms and explosives were useless. You saw the transcript, at least of the power safe enough to use inside a town. So he tried poison. Knowing nothing about the creature, he used half a dozen sorts in quantities sufficient for a regiment and concealed in several kinds of food. Well, Lummox gobbled them all. They didn't even make him sleepy. In fact, it seemed to stimulate his appetite, for the next thing he did was to eat the intake valve, and the reservoir started to fill up again. I had to shut it off from the pumping station. Kiku snickered. I'm beginning to like this, Lummox. Did you say he ate the valve? What was it made of? I don't know. The usual alloy, I suppose. Seems to like a bit of roughage in its diet. Perhaps it has a craw like a bird. I wouldn't be surprised. What did the chief do next? Nothing as yet. I asked O'Farrell to impress on Dressier that he was likely to end up in a penal colony 30 light years from Westville if he persisted in bucking the department. So he is waiting and trying to figure out his problem. His latest notion is to cast Lummox in concrete and let him die at his own convenience. But O'Farrell put the nix on that one. Inhumane. So Lummox is still in the reservoir waiting for us to act, eh? I believe so, sir. He was there yesterday. Well, he can wait there, I suppose, until other action can be taken. Mr. Kiku picked up Greenberg's short-form report and recommendation. Greenberg said, I take it that you are overruling me, sir? No, what gave you that idea? He signed the order permitting the destruction of Lummox and let it be swallowed by the outgoing basket. I don't reverse a man's decision without firing him, and I have another job for you. Oh. Greenberg felt a twinge of compassion. He had been expecting, with relief, that the chief would reprieve Lummox's death sentence. Well, too bad. But the beast was dangerous. Mr. Kiku went on, Are you afraid of snakes? No, I rather like them. Excellent, though it's a feeling I can't imagine. I've always been deathly afraid of them. Once when I was a boy in Africa, never mind. Have you ever worked closely with Rargelians? I don't recall. Greenberg suddenly understood. I used a Rargelian interpreter in the Vega 6 affair. I get along all right with Rargelians. I wish I did. Sergei, I have some business which involves a Rargelian interpreter, a Dr. Ftamel. You may have heard of him. Yes, of course, sir. I'll admit that as Rargelians go, he made the noun sound like a swear word, Ftamel is all right, but this involvement has the odor of trouble, and I find my own nose for trouble blanked out by this phobia of mine, so I'm putting you on as my assistant to sniff for me. I thought you didn't trust my nose, boss. Well, let the blind lead the blind, if you'll forgive a switch in metaphor. Perhaps between us we'll sniff it out. Yes, sir. May I ask the nature of the assignment? Well, before Mr. Kiku could answer, his secretary's light flashed and her voice stated, Your hypnotherapist is here, sir. The undersecretary glanced at his clock and said, Where does the time go? Then to the communicator, Put him in my dressing room. I'll be in. He continued to Greenberg, Ftamel will be here in 30 minutes. I can't stop to talk. I've got to get braced for him. You'll find out what there is, little enough, in my pending urgent file. Mr. Kiku glanced at his incoming basket, which had filled to overflowing while they talked. It won't take 5 minutes. Spend the rest of the time clearing up that stack of waste paper. Sign my name and hold anything you think I must see, but it had better be no more than half a dozen items, or I'll send you back to Harvard. He got up hurriedly while making a mental note to tell his secretary from his dressing room to note everything that went through in the next half hour and let him see it later. He wanted to see how the lad worked. Mr. Kiku was aware that he would die some day, and he intended to see to it that Greenberg replaced him. In the meantime, life should be as tough for the boy as possible. The undersecretary headed for his dressing room, the door ducked aside, contracting behind him. Greenberg was left alone. He was reaching for the pending urgent file when a paper dropped into the incoming basket just as the light on it blinked red and a buzzer sounded. He picked up the paper, ran his eye down the middle, and had just realized that it really was urgent when a similar light and buzzer combination showed at the inter-office communicator and its screen came to life. Greenberg recognized the chief of the Bureau of System Liaison. "Boss," the image said excitedly. Greenberg touched the two-way switch. "Greenberg here," he answered. "I'm keeping the chief's chair warm for him. Your memo just came in, Stan. I'm reading it." Ibanez looked annoyed. "Never mind that. Get me the boss." Greenberg hesitated. Ibanez's problem was simple but sticky. Ships from Venus were regularly granted pratique without delay, each ship's doctor being a public health deputy. But the Ariel, already due at Port Libya, had suddenly been placed under quarantine by her doctor and was now waiting in a parking orbit. The Venerian's foreign minister was aboard, most unfortunately, as Venus was expected to support Terra's position against Mars at the impending Triangular Conference. Greenberg could stall the touchy problem until the boss was free. He could break in on the boss. He could go over the boss's head to the secretary himself, which meant picking an answer and presenting it so as to get the answer approved. Or he could act using Mr. Kiku's authority. Mr. Kiku could not have predicted the emergency, but the boss had a pesky habit of pushing people off the deep end. Greenberg's summing up had been quick. He answered, "Sorry, Stan, you can't talk to the boss. I'm acting for him." "Eh? Since when?" "Just temporarily, but I am." Ibanez frowned. "Look, chum, you'd better find the boss. Maybe you are signing his name on routine matters, but this is not routine. We've got to bring that ship down in a hurry. Your neck would be out a yard if you took it upon yourself to authorize me to overlook a basic rule like quarantine. Use your head." Break quarantine? Greenberg recalled the Great Plague of '51, back in the days when the biologists serenely believed that each planetary group was immune to the ills of other planets. "We won't break quarantine." Ibanez looked pained. "Sergei, we can jeopardize this conference." Jeopardize, what can I say? "We can't toss away 10 years' work because some crewman has a light fever. The quarantine must be broken, but I don't expect you to do it." Greenberg hesitated. "He's under hypnosis for a tough job coming up. It may be a couple of hours before you can see him." Ibanez looked blank. "I'll have to tackle the secretary. I don't dare wait 2 hours. That sacred cow from Venus is like as not to order his skipper to head home. We can't risk that. And we can't risk bringing in an epidemic either. Here's what you do. Call him and tell him you are coming to get him in person. Use a fast scout. Get him aboard and leave the Ariel in quarantine orbit. Once you get him aboard the Scout, and not before, tell him that both you and he will attend the conference in isolation suits." The isolation suit was a sealed pressure suit. Its primary use was to visit planets whose disease hazards had not yet been learned. The Scout ship and crew will have to go into quarantine too, of course. "Isolation suit? Oh, he'll love that. Sergei, it would be less damaging to call off the conference. An indignity like that would put him against us for certain. The jerk is poisonously proud." "Sure, he'll love it," Greenberg explained, "once you suggest how to play it. Great personal sacrifice, unwilling to risk the welfare of our beloved sister planet. The call of duty takes precedence over any, etc. If you don't feel sure of it, take one of the public relation boys along. And look, all through the conference he must be attended by a physician in a white suit and a couple of nurses. The conference must stop every now and then while he rests. Put a cot and hospital screen in the Hall of Heroes near the conference table. The idea is that he's come down with it himself, but is carrying on as his dying act. Get it? Tell him before you land the scout ship. Indirectly, of course." Ibanez looked perturbed. "Do you think that'll work?" "It's up to you to make it work. I'm sending down your memo, ordering quarantine to continue, but telling you to use your initiative to ensure his presence at the conference." "Well, all right," Ibanez suddenly grinned. "Never mind the memo. I'm on my way." He switched off. So that's how they do things at the Department of Spatial Affairs. And we still have a signed order for Lummox's destruction. But we'll find out what happens about that next time.